Hey guys, it's Kevin here, my review for the second season of a series of unfortunate events. And what this season is essentially about is basically the same as the first season. We follow the Baudelaires and them, through many endless escapes, trying to get away from Count Olaf, yet, it seems like wherever they go, he keeps finding them, but also, in turn, trying to discover more secrets about their past, maybe what finally led to that fire, and that's really all I'm going to say. So, when it comes to season 2 of the show, as you guys know, I was a huge fan of the first season. I thought it was really creative, but also really witty and fun, but also had this really great sort of self-aware edge to it that I really did enjoy. But if you guys remember, the way that season ended, it felt very uncertain with the way things were really going to play out. And me not being a book reader and someone who has actually read the books, I was very interested in seeing where the show was really going to go from here. And I have to say, while season 2 I don't think is as good as season 1, this is still a really well done season with some really great reveals, some, really well done mystery aspects, and definitely is a lot darker than the first one was. But we're getting into right now, starting off with the cast. And just like the first season, that's one of the best things about the show. The cast, honestly, I think really steps it up this season. It's not like the first season, they weren't great, but season 2, they're even better. And that is especially true for Neil Patrick Harris, who I know people have been very hot and cold when it comes to this portrayal. Some people really loved him as Count Olaf, and then I kind of noticed over time that that kind of dwindled a bit, and people have gotten a little bit more sour, and I think this season proves that that is definitely not warranted. Harris is incredibly talented in this role, and he's given a lot more to do this season. He's not just the goofy sort of ex-guardian of the Baudelaires who wants to claim their fortune and wants them in his clutches, because yes, he is that, but there is a lot more layers given to him. We actually do dive a little bit deeper into some of the nuances of the character, who he was before all this, and I think Harris really did a great job. He has so much range as his character, and especially given what he has to do. I mean, every episode, he has a different sort of disguise, and there are all kinds of different voices and different sorts of idiosyncrasies of these characters that he brings to the role, and he just does such a great job. Sure, maybe he hasn't had a lot of success beyond the show and a couple other things, but if one thing shows, he's definitely a very hardworking actor and definitely isn't given enough credit. He really is phenomenal in this show. And same goes for the three Baudelaires. I think also, just like last season, I thought they were one of the highlights of this season. They still do a really great job. Malina, Weissman, Hynes especially steps it up here. I thought he was really good in season 1, but here he's even better, I thought. He really did an incredible job. Presley Smith is just so adorable and fun as Sonny. I just really love the three Baudelaires. They work very well within this season, and I definitely really enjoyed them here. But someone else I definitely need to credit this season is Lucy Punch as Esme Squalor, who, holy shit, I mean, she comes into the show and pretty much just steals every scene that she's in, even more so than I think Neil Patrick Harris did. And it's hard to talk about her character without really delving into spoilers and all that, but let's just say that she is very much connected to Olaf in some way. There is this certain item that she is in possession of. She is incredibly wealthy, and at times is even more relentless than Olaf is. I mean, she is just as adamant about getting this certain object, and where they really go with her is really great. These two have such a great dynamic. She's so fun to watch at points, but at the same time, you're also kind of terrified of her. I mean, she really does a great job. Like I said, she really chews up a lot of the scenery. She steals nearly every scene that she's in, and she is definitely one of the highlights of this season for sure. She was fantastic here. And then everyone else here, once again, does a really great job. Patrick Warburton continues to be a standout as Lemony Snicket. Sure, a lot of times he does kind of feel kind of arbitrary and like he's supposed to be there, but again, they do dive a little bit deeper into him, and I thought they did a really good job with that. The two actors that play the Quagmires this season, Avi Lake and Dylan Kingwell, we'll get more into their characters a little bit later, but they were both really solid here. I thought they both did a really great job. And Todd Freeman continues to delight as the very eccentric and very always good-natured, but just very misguided Mr. Poe. He is still a lot of fun to watch here. He's someone who you just kind of love to see him mess up, and you love to see him misinterpret things, and he was definitely a lot of fun. And there's a lot of great guest star roles throughout the season as well, just like Season 1. A lot of cameos in here. David Alan Grier pops up at one point. Robbie Amell. Even Nathan Fillion has a huge role this season as Jock Snicken, and I don't want to get too much into what he does, but really everyone did a great job here. There wasn't anyone that I thought was bad this season, and that continues to be one of the best things about the show for sure. But now let's get to the directing and the writing, because once again, that was one of the highlights of Season 1. And I'll say this, everything that was great about the directing in Season 1 carries over to Season 2. Like I said, that very sort of self-aware approach is very much still there. This show very much knows what it is. There's constantly times where they're telling you to look away, and they're telling you this is horrible what you're watching, and that's just a really fun element of the show. I've always really enjoyed that running joke. And the humor still very much does work. This season is a lot weirder than Season 1. Not that Season 1 wasn't weird, but this season is like, they really up the ante in terms of weird and eccentric humor, and just how much crazy stuff can we throw into here. And they really did a great job with that, I have to say. There's a lot of great running gags this season, particularly one in the Hostel Hospital episode. I don't want to get too much into it, but it involves these volunteers, and that's all I'm going to say. But that running gag has to be one of the most clever things I've seen in a while. What I love about the show is how they will do something as simple as just, you know, someone mispronouncing a word wrong and make it hilarious. And they do a really great job with that here. I thought there was so much great, smart humor peppered throughout the season, just like Season 1. And that's something that's really great about the show. Kids can watch it, and they'll get a lot more smart type humor than they will in most kids shows. The show is much more elegant in that way. And sure, there is some wacky stuff in here, but there is a lot of really smart stuff that you actually have to really listen to in order to get the punchline, and I thought that was really well done. But like I said, this season does get a lot darker. They're not afraid to get into some really hard to watch, even sometimes hard to watch stuff in this season. I mean, this season does go into some really dark directions, and I thought the directing was really spot on in that regard. And once again, just like Season 1, when you couple that with the comedy, it just works hand in hand, and I was very happy with the way that played out. The writing, however, is easily my biggest problem with this season. Now, it's not for the whole season, but I will say, right off the bat, this show is quite formulaic. You know, that's something that is a complaint with you. Pretty much every TV show does have some sort of formula, but this season especially does feel that way. And if someone were to complain that the show is too formulaic, you know, in regards to this season, I think that totally underlines that problem here, where every episode just kind of feels the same, where the Baudelaires are in this new location, Count Olaf eventually finds them, no one really believes that he is Count Olaf until the very end. You know, once they find out, they find the tattoo on his ankle, and the Baudelaires are whisked away to their next guardian, and they just kind of have repeated this cycle for about 9 or 10 episodes now, and, you know, it's not like it's bad here, because it is a well-done formula. The show does excel at it pretty well. It's just after a while, it feels a bit, weightless, and it just doesn't feel as suspenseful as the show wants it to be. We know the Baudelaires are going to get out of this. We know that Count Olaf is not going to get the Baudelaires, so it does feel like they're kind of lessening some of the intrigue and some of the suspense, and the things that they think are really shocking aren't as shocking. So that whole regard, no, it does not excel as well as Season 1 does, because we already know the way it is going to play out. However, the show does wisely dive a bit deeper into some other things that we don't know as much about. Specifically when it comes to the FD, the show gets a lot more into this secret organization that their parents were a part of, and you know, Season 1, we had a lot of clues about it. This season, that's basically the main plot, is them discovering this organization and how this is connected to the Baudelaire fire and what their parents have been doing, and maybe trying to figure out how this gets them out of this situation. And I thought all that stuff was really interesting, and it's something I heard the book didn't do, is they flesh a lot, they flesh these characters out a lot more. Someone like Jock Snicket or Olivia Caliban or you know, many of these, or Jacqueline, you know, these characters have a lot more to do than they did in the books, and I really enjoyed the way they did that here. I thought it was a very smart way to do that because, again, it's different from season 1, and the formula itself, it does feel a bit tired. It does feel a bit predictable, and it's not monotonous. Like, that's not the way to describe it. There are some shows where they'll do that, like, you know, some shows I'm thinking of, Walking Dead, for example, you know, nothing else offhand, but there are a lot of shows that do that, and it does feel very monotonous. Like, there just isn't really much to it. The first half of the season, it does kind of feel the way. It feels like we're just kind of watching the same thing happen in different locales, but it just feels very familiar, and there just really isn't that much of a difference. However, the second half of the season, that's really when things get great. There is a significant shift at the end of episode 6, and where this ends up taking the show is really, really daring. And it's a very ballsy decision for what they end up doing, but I really enjoyed it because, again, the show was starting to feel a bit formulaic. It was starting to feel like it didn't have much more to do with itself, so by giving us this big twist, it takes the show into a whole new direction and really changes things up, so it becomes a lot less predictable, and that's something that I definitely really did enjoy about the season. The season as a whole isn't great, but the second half of the season absolutely is. It elevates the show to new heights, and I just really love what they did in regards to that second half of the season. It was very well done. However, the road to getting there is a bit rough, specifically when it comes to the main storyline besides the whole VFD thing. The other big storyline this season has to do with the Quagmires, and season 1 built them up as these huge characters that were going to give the Baudelaires all kinds of secrets and things like that, and it's not like they don't. But if you were thinking that the Quagmires were going to be as well fleshed out as the Baudelaires and they were going to be very interesting, you are going to be very let down because the Quagmires, they don't really feel like characters this season. Most of the season is the Baudelaires trying to rescue them and, you know, doing what they can to get the information that they want from the Quagmires, and they just don't really feel like very well fleshed out characters. The problem is the show wants us to care for them. The show wants us to feel just as bad for them as we do for the Baudelaires, and it's not like we can't. I mean, obviously, we saw both of their parents die, and their brother died as well. We know, obviously, what these two characters have been through. It's just when you compare it to the Baudelaires and how well fleshed out they were, the Quagmires just really do pale in comparison, and they just did not really feel like the most well fleshed out characters, and I'm not gonna lie, I did feel kind of underwhelmed when we got to the end of their story. Without spoiling anything, the Quagmire story does end in this season. It starts and ends, and the way it ends, it was a good ending. It wasn't like it was a bad ending or anything. I just didn't really feel that connected, and I was hoping that they would flesh them out more, but they just really don't. And you know, similar to Baudelaires, there is really interesting stuff about them. You know, Isadora, for example, she is obsessed with poems, and she loves to write, you know, sonnets and things like that, but the show is barely scratching the surface when it comes to her obsession with this. And then with Duncan, you know, we don't really know much about his character, and the show kind of hints at some romantic pairings as well, and it just never really feels that earned because we don't feel that connected to these characters, and I did feel that that was very much missing. However, I will say when it comes to someone like Esme Squalor, they flesh her out a lot better than they do the Quagmires, and that is something I will absolutely give this show. Most of the characters this season are very well fleshed out. Most of the characters this season are very interesting. It's just the Quagmires in general, I really wanted more from them, and I felt they could have done a lot more with those characters overall than they really did end up doing. And in turn, just like how I did think some of the formula started to be a bit just kind of tired, Lemonie's narration at points did feel a bit tiresome. It felt less like it was important to the show, and like it was adding all these mystery, and at points it just felt as if he was treating the audience as if they were dumb and kind of talking down to them and like, all right, this is really what this means. If you're confused about this, let me explain this for you. And thankfully the whole season doesn't feel that way, but there are a couple episodes where I did very much feel like, can you just go now? Like, we don't really need you here. You're not really needed in this episode. And luckily the last few episodes, they actually don't use him as much, but he does become a lot more vital as the season does go on, and I actually did enjoy that. I like that towards the end of the season they gave him more of a purpose than just kind of explaining things to us like the first half of the season kind of suggested. But like I said, once that second half does kick in, it gets really great, and it goes into some really dark directions, some that are even pretty violent. I mean, there's a whole two-parter, which probably is the standout episode of the season where they're trapped in this hospital, and the show goes from something really wacky and just very gothic to a straight up horror show. I mean, this two-parter is honestly really scary at points, and they really did up the ante when it came to darkening the show, and I thought they did an incredible job with that here. I was very impressed with the way that was handled, and again, they took it into all kinds of new directions. I will say, however, if you're going to watch this season, do not watch the trailer, because the trailer, without saying anything, spoils the final shots of the season. Now, I did not watch the trailer prior to this season. I'm glad I didn't, because it literally shows the final shot of the season in this trailer, and it's a pretty big cliffhanger, the way the season does end. It's a huge cliffhanger, and just don't watch the trailer, whatever you do. It is definitely not, it is recommended you do not watch it at all. Also, the cinematography of the show continues to be some of the best, I think, on any show. What I love about this show so much is whatever location that they go to, it's a different sort of color scheme and a different sort of genre, and you know, you also see that their appearance changes, their costumes fit in with that specific place they're in. For example, there's one episode where they go with Esme Squalor, and they're with all these sort of like rich sort of debutantes, and you know, because that their whole attire changes to these like black and white suits. Then there's another episode where they're in this like sort of Western type setting, and their appearance changes there too. So I really did like the way where wherever they were, their costumes pretty much fit in with the atmosphere of the town. I thought it was honestly a very daring choice, and again, the show really does try to do something different with each location, and it for the most part does exceed with that. This is specifically shown in the second half of the season, which, like I said, takes us to some very dark and daring places, and that's something that I very much did enjoy, is where they ended up going with that. I thought that was definitely really cool. The season also has a really great theme when it comes to the townspeople, and it's not like they didn't show this in season 1, but they really do get into the hostility of the townspeople and how easy they are going to just, you know, just basically follow all of Count Olaf's orders, you know, no matter who he is. We see that throughout this entire season, and, you know, that's the big message of this season, is just how corrupted this town is, and how corrupted every, you know, society really can be, and how easy they are to just, you know, follow someone than they are to deviate from them. And I thought that was very well realized here. It's, again, it's not like we didn't get into that in the first season, but the second season, that basically is like the main message, and I thought that was definitely really great. The score by James Newton Howard, once again, is great. Just like the first season, there are 2 songs here, and while they aren't as memorable as the songs in season 1, I still did really enjoy them, particularly one in episode 3. Ever since I watched it, I found myself humming it a lot, and I've been singing that song ever since I've watched it, so it definitely is memorable. Like I said, just not as memorable as season 1. And then the editing, I will admit some episodes of season are a bit too long. I am definitely looking at the Earsat's elevator. The first part of that episode really did drag on. There was a lot of stuff going on there. Thankfully, it all does pay off for the most part. There's just some episodes that do feel a bit too long, and especially the fact that this is basically a kid's show. I do feel that some of the the episodes really do drag, and I wouldn't be surprised if a little kid little kids should not be watching the show. It's like, I'd say like 7 and up, that's like when they should start watching it. But little kids should not be watching it. It drags on too long. Like I said, it really does get a lot darker. But if a kid were to watch the show, I would not be surprised they did end up bored. However, with all that said, guys, I do want to jump into some spoilers here. If you have not seen Series of Fortune Events Season 2, do not watch the rest of this video. These are major spoilers, guys, and I mean like game-changing stuff that pretty much changes up the entire show, but we're just going to get into it. So like I said, first half of the season, I did feel was kind of repetitive. There was some great reveals in there, like the whole thing with Esme being allied with Count Olaf the whole time, and the fact that these two actually were lovers, and not just that, but she was actually one of his students, and he was her acting coach. I thought was actually a really great twist. It now showed, you know, what the purpose of Esme really was, because the way they were portraying her, I'm like, there's no way she's just going to easily buy everything that the Baudelaires are telling her, when almost every other adult doesn't believe them until the very end. It just didn't really make a lot of sense that she'd believe them, and you know, when it was revealed, that twist, I thought that was honestly very well done. However, I thought the season got especially great once it came to the ending of the Vile Village, because the way that ends is really interesting. You know, we end that episode, and pretty much every single person thinks that the Baudelaires are these serial killers, and that they straight up murdered, you know, Jock Snicket, who basically they are now, you know, Count Olaf obviously framed him as himself, and it makes sense why the townspeople, once again, are so easily buying everything, because of the fact that, you know, all they really pay attention to is that eyebrow and that tattoo on his ankle, and we see that Mr. Poe is just as much of a crowd follower. He isn't willing to, you know, look more into it, and, that's sort of the comedy when it comes to him, but I am glad that he's not going to be in the show as much, because I'm not going to lie, I did think some of his stuff did get a bit annoying. Freeman is so great as the character, it's hard to get that annoyed by him, but some of it did become like, alright, like, can you just believe them? Like, seriously, they've told you this for episodes now, why can't you just believe them already? Some of that did get a bit annoying, but once we get into the whole thing with them now being fugitives and them on the run, and Olaf basically having no reason to be, you know, to don these disguises anymore, I thought was just a very daring direction for the show, because you really don't know what's going to happen now. I mean, Olaf, he could get them at any second, and there's really nothing stopping him now, because everyone else thinks that Olaf is dead, and, you know, he becomes a lot more intelligent and a lot more daring in the way he approaches things. I mean, Hostile Hospital, he literally is willing to kill Violet, you know, literally willing to take out Violet's brain and basically kill her just so he can get the fortune. A lot of people have said, you know, why does he want their fortune if Esme is so rich? Well, we clearly see this season there's a lot more to it than that, obviously, because of the fact that we now know that he was involved with VFD, and we know that he was a major part of it, and clearly something caused him to turn evil, and that, of course, is the Sugar Bowl. Now, we don't know what the significance of this object is. All we know is that Esme is very adamant about tracking down the Sugar Bowl, and that someone else did take it, and the thing that we know is that Allison Williams' character is the person who did, in fact, take the Sugar Bowl, but that's really all we know. We don't know what the significance of it is. We don't know why she wants it so badly, and I'm sure we're going to get more into that. I also really like how this season dived more into the VFD, and especially once Count Olaf learns that one of the Baudelaire parents might have actually survived the fire, that's when things got even more interesting, because now he has a newfound sense of purpose. It isn't just about tracking down the Baudelaire's fortune. In fact, he's kind of sidetracked it now. He's not as interested in going after the Baudelaires. If anything, he wants to get them out of the way, so that way he can then use this to his advantage, and I'm very interested in getting into all that. I think that is a very interesting plot point overall, and the way this season does end, in basically complete, uncertainty, and even more than the first season. I think it ends in complete uncertainty, and it doesn't end with any sense of finality whatsoever. I really did love. Now, we know obviously the Violet and Klaus are not going to die from, you know, what Olaf did to them when they were in that cage from the Caligari Carnival, but obviously, they're separated from Sonny. It's a bit different because, you know, it's always been the three of them, and for once it's going to be the two of them. And that's something I really love about Hostile Hospitals, the fact that Violet and Klaus were actually separated, something that we didn't really get to see before. I really did love that. But I am very interested in seeing where Season 3 does play out. They already said Season 3 is going to be the last season of the show, and I'm just hoping we get a lot more answers, like what is the significance of the Sugar Bowl, find out more about VFD, which I gotta say, it was really cool to see that flashback, which I was not expecting in the penultimate episode. We actually did see sort of VFD before this whole ordeal happened, before the Sugar Bowl was stolen, before Beatrice died. We even got to see Lemony in his prime, which is not something I was expecting at all, but we do see that Lemony is very much connected to the Baudelaires in that sense. He was a part of VFD, and I'm interested in seeing, since the show does dive deeper into, you know, who Lemony really is, you know, are they maybe going to give him more layers? Are we going to see them actually meet up with Lemony? I mean, I don't really know. We'll have to see the way that really does play out. He's already said that there's a lot of stuff that he doesn't know. We still don't exactly know when his whole narration is taking place, but I do think it does add a lot of layers to the show, and just in general, I'm very interested in seeing really where we do go from here. But overall, guys, when it does come down to it, Series of Unfortunate Events Season 2 is still very well done. It starts off very formulaic and familiar, but eventually does up the stakes of the previous season considerably, and really does take the show in a very daring and different direction, to the point where I really don't know what's going to happen in Season 3, and I'm okay with that, similar to the way that Season 1 ended. I'm very uncertain with how it's going to end. There are things I do know heading into the final books, but in general, I'm sure the show is going to surprise me. There's a lot of stuff they did change up. It deepened a lot of the characters. It got us more into some of the mythology of what was going on. The humor still lands very well. I think some of the acting was even improved this season. Just in general, this was a very well done follow-up. While not as good, I still really did enjoy it overall. The things that are great are still really great about this season. There are some truly terrific moments, and definitely towards the end, it for sure paid off. And because of that, I am going to give a Series of Unfortunate Events Season 2 overall a B+. But overall, guys, my review of a Series of Unfortunate Events Season 2. Let me know what you guys thought of the season overall, left your thoughts, and definitely looking forward to seeing how Season 3, the final season, does play out. I will see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.